Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 6 wide receiver starter sits for the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about some news around the National Football League that pertains to fantasy football, then going over my matchups at the wide receiver position going into Week 6, then going over my top 36 rankings at the position, my wide receiver 1, 2, and 3s. Before we get into that, let me remind all of you, if you haven't yet already, click that subscribe button, join the community, and make sure you click that bell notification button to be up to date on my latest content. As soon as it's out, you are notified. Also, don't forget to click the like button on today's video. All right, guys. Hey, how's it going? Before we begin today's content, let's talk about some news around the National Football League, specifically pertaining to Thursday Night Football. So, from what I've heard, Saquon Barkley will be out. Wayne Gallman will be out. Evan Ingram will be out. Sterling Shepard will be out. There are not many options left available for offensive pieces in that game in terms of on the Giants side of the ball, outside of Daniel Jones, perhaps Golden Tate maybe this week as an option. Really, it looks pretty bleak. So the other side of the football, the New England Patriots, their defense, going to have another great week. Speaking of the Patriots, Philip Dorsett has been ruled out for this week, this Thursday. So that kind of helps, I guess, Josh Gordon and Edelman going into this week. Edelman looking at right there, my number 11. But either way, I just wanted to go ahead and update that. Other pieces of information that are pretty important. Number one, Case Keenum will be the starting quarterback of the Redskins going forward. That absolutely helps Terry McLaurin. I think he probably should be considered higher than what he is on this list. I just didn't want to redo the graphic. We'll talk about it when we get there. Outside of that, Chris Herndon, hamstring injury. I don't know if he's going to play this week. Hunter Henry participated in a limited practice earlier today, which is trending him towards playing in the coming weeks, which is absolutely fantastic for those of you who went and picked him up this week off the waivers. But that's pretty much it. In terms of information, we'll probably get a little bit more closer to whether or not guys like Tyreek Hill or Davante Adams are playing this week by Thursday and Friday. So stay up to tune with that, and I'll talk about that in the coming days. But other than that, let's get into it, shall we? Let's talk about the matchups at the wide receiver position for Week 6 of the fantasy football season. All right, so we're talking about the wide receiver position and who gives up the most points to opposing wide receivers. Well, it's the Atlanta Falcons. They got destroyed by Will Fuller this past week, and Deshaun Watson throwing the ball. Just the Atlanta Falcons defense is pedestrian at very best. The Arizona Cardinals, if they were a better team, would be able to take advantage of this incredible opportunity, but because of the fact that Christian Kirk is still dealing with injuries, Larry Fitzgerald isn't being used as vitally or as much as we'd like him to be used, and David Johnson is dealing with a back injury, it might not be taken advantage of fully, but it's still going to be a great matchup for Kyler Murray and that receiving core. Other than that, the Giants giving up a lot of points to the wide receiver position only helps the Patriots. The Washington Redskins playing against the Dolphins. The only Dolphin that I could see potentially starting is maybe Preston Williams this coming week. I know Devontae Parker did a couple things in the last couple weeks, but truly I just don't trust Devontae Parker. So Preston Williams is maybe my only option there against the Redskins. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been awful defensively. Stopping the run is not a problem. Stopping the pass, in fact, is just they can't do it. They literally cannot do it. And that's okay. So for those of you who own the DJ Moores and the Curtis Samuels and the Greg Olsons, should be good this week. Moving on, the Eagles struggling against the pass. Well, hopefully Kirk Cousins can put himself in a good position this week to feed the ball to Adam Thielen and to Stefon Diggs, owners of those two receivers. Just want consistency, and that's hopefully what we're going to see this week. The Saints struggling against wide receivers. We'll see what Gardner Minshew can do there with DJ Chark. Moving on, we have the Texans, the Raiders on a bye week, the Ravens, and then, the other pedestrian middle-of-the-pack teams. In terms of the Texans, they play against, Patrick Mahomes. If Tyreek Hill plays, it only helps them out. Sammy Watkins dealing with the hamstring injury. We'll get more information as the week progresses on that. And then the Baltimore Ravens defensively don't even look nearly as good as they have in the past. I mean, they are just, it's their weakest facet of their entire team. The Ravens defense has struggled so heavily in the last couple of weeks, it's almost knocked them out of games. That's why they lost to the Browns. That's why they allowed the Browns to put 40 on them, because their defense is just not capable of competing at a high level at this moment in time in terms of what they've built there defensively. They let a lot of pieces go in the offseason, which is unfortunate, They had the Zadarius Smith. What is he doing for the Packers? He's lighting them up. They let go of C.J. Mosley. He went to the Jets. He was a little injured and stuff like that, but still, that's a good middle linebacker. No more Eric Weddle. You brought in Earl Thomas. Still hasn't made a difference. A little rough there in their defensive side of the ball. Moving on to the tougher matchups of the wide receiver position. The Green Bay Packers, even though they got destroyed by Dak Prescott in the second half, where Michael Gallup surpassed 100 receiving yards, and Amari Cooper had over 200. Really, I don't know how good they are defensively. A lot of that game was, hey, let's just survive, let's hold on and live long enough to see the next day, in which they were able to do. But, Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones still have an opportunity there. The Chiefs, pretty good against the wide receiver, because typically they're not good against the run. People just run the ball on them, and they get away with that. Moving on, the 49ers, the Browns, well, because both of those teams, technically, the 49ers have been good defensively because of their pass rush. The Browns are good against wide receivers because they get the ball ran on them nearly the entire time. The Bengals, again, another team that's giving up a lot of points to opposing running backs. The Bears on a bye week, irrelevant. The Denver Broncos, another team that give up a lot of points on the ground. The Buffalo Bills on a bye week. The Cowboys, and then the Patriots. Anyway, those are the matchups at the wide receiver position. This is how much defenses are giving to opposing wide receivers on a weekly basis on average in half-point PPR scoring format. So hopefully this helps you guys out. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about my top 36 rankings for week 6 of the fantasy football season at the wide receiver position. All right, so number 1. Here's the thing, okay? Number 1, 2, and 3 is pretty set. But Julio Jones as my number 1 this week, playing against the Cardinals secondary. Patrick Peterson will not be back until next week. It's a 6-week suspension, so he will be back in week 7. But for as of right now, the Atlanta Falcons, they cannot play defense. They have to throw the ball consistently. What we've seen in the last couple weeks is guys like Mohamed Sanu, Austin Hooper, Devontae Freeman, Calvin Ridley, all step up and make plays, while Julio is kind of sat by the wayside, pretty much pulled double coverage and really disappeared in this offense. Either way, Julio Jones is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Just because he's pulling that attention does not mean he does not have the capability or the opportunity to make a big play. Matt Ryan just has to give him the chance. And I think going forward into this matchup against the Cardinals, he will have that opportunity. He should be fine. He's my number 1 wide receiver on the week. Moving on to number 2, Michael Thomas. Monster week this past week. Gets to play against the Jacksonville secondary. If, in fact, they are missing Jalen Ramsey for another week, it is only going to help Michael Thomas as of right now. Thinking about it, what have we seen in the last couple weeks? Last week, really, it was the Christian McCaffrey show in terms of that defense just getting destroyed. And then the week before that, they let Courtland Sutton put up a 20-point week against that secondary. I really do think a guy like Michael Thomas with Teddy Bridgewater in stride, having a little bit more confidence underneath his belt, I really do think Michael Thomas this week as my number 2. Pretty solid play. Moving on to number 3, DeAndre Hopkins. Now, if you're a DeAndre Hopkins owner and you're thinking, I cannot trust this guy, then you should trade him. If you are not of the mindset that you should be playing him against the Kansas City Chiefs in a matchup that I believe should be a higher scoring event. Now, we understood that the Colts and Kansas City Chiefs matchup probably should have been a higher scoring event, but Patrick Mahomes, nowhere to be found. That offense, nowhere to be found in terms of moving the ball effectively. As of right now, with the momentum that this Houston Texans offense is bringing, I really do believe DeAndre Hopkins cannot be left on the bench. If you want to bench him, sure, but I think if you're going to leave him on the bench, you might as well just trade him. That's what I'm saying, because every week, if he is on my roster, he is in the starting wide receiver position unless he's on bye. That's just how it's going to go. I'm living and dying by DeAndre Hopkins. He's my number 3 on the week. All right, moving on to number 4, Cooper Kupp. Now we're going to talk about some wide receivers that have actually been consistent as of late. Guys that on the last 3 weeks have been dominating. Cooper Kupp, the guy he is the number 1 of the Rams. The Rams offense continuously is going to score a lot of points. And outside of him, there are really nobody in that offense that is matchup proof. He is matchup proof because of the targets he sees, because no one in the slot position no one is going to guard the slot position and just double cover Cooper Kupp. They can't do that. Not against the Rams. And as of right now, he's just running free. He's making a lot of plays, and he's looking really good. And, nothing else needs to be said. Cooper Kupp, as of right now, what is he, the number 1 or 2 wide receiver in fantasy, right behind Chris Godwin? He's just consistent. 20-plus points a week. He's my number 4. Number 5, Chris Godwin. Speaking of Chris Godwin, Another one of these consistent wide receivers. If he's going to continue to be the number one of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, then so be it. The guy has been extremely consistent, and there's no reason to take him out of your lineup, and there's nothing else need to be said about him. He's been fantastic. This offense, they did get bailed out a couple times this past week. Jameis threw 2 interceptions, and they were both called back on penalties, which helped Chris Godwin later on in those drives close it off with touchdowns. And hopefully, if we can just keep Jameis Winston's turnovers down and make sure that this offense is kind of rolling in the right direction, Chris Godwin's going to continue to be successful. He's my number 5. Number 6, Amari Cooper. With this offense, let's think about it. The Jets defense can't stop a soul through the air. The Jets offense has struggled heavily. Sure, they get Darnold back, but I don't know if that's going to make the biggest difference in terms of being able to turn this organization around, especially against a team like the Cowboys. As of right now, with Amari Cooper, with Michael Gallup on the field, this passing offense is extremely deadly, and I do believe a guy like Amari Cooper this week against the Jets, who have struggled heavily against wide receivers, should be a pretty free matchup here. The only reason in terms of points given up to opposing wide receivers, the Jets aren't higher than the number 11 spot is because in the last couple weeks, all teams have had to do is score a little bit in the beginning of the game, then just run the clock out with the running game the rest of the way. Either way, Mark Cooper, you're my number 6. Speaking of the thumbnail, let's talk about Adam Thielen, my number 7. On the week, you get to play against the Eagles. The Eagles are great at stopping the run. Therefore, Kirk Cousins will have to pass the ball consistently, and he's going to have to find Adam Thielen because that's pretty much his number 1 wide receiver. It was for him last season, and it's going to continue to be as long as he is, in Minnesota as of right now. So, Adam Thielen had a monster week, had a great comeback week after that call to action. I told you guys, when you have a call to action in the NFL, typically the following week, teams are going to focus on feeding that person the ball. A couple weeks back was, hey, we're going to give Davante Adams and Jimmy Graham the ball. What did they do? They both had touchdowns or they both scored a lot of points that week. Davante Adams did not have a touchdown. And then we have a guy like Adam Thielen coming out and saying, we need to throw the ball in order to be successful. Guess what? He had 2 touchdown grabs and a bunch of targets. Perfectly fine. Going forward into this matchup should be great. All right, let's go ahead and talk about number 8, Keenan Allen. All right, so here's the thing. Keenan Allen's kind of disappeared in the last 2 weeks, right? Surprisingly, yeah. It's unfortunate, but that's just how the wide receiver position works. There's no consistently. Because there is no consistent amount of rushing attempts or guaranteed receptions, you just can't trust in a wide receiver every single week. There are always going to be dud weeks. That's just the nature of the position. Keenan Allen, either way, this coming week, playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers at home, I really do believe this is going to be a one-sided affair with the Pittsburgh Steelers having their third-string quarterback in. They're going to have a tough time moving the ball, and when the Chargers get the ball back, Keenan Allen's going to be targeted heavily, and he's going to lead this team. He's my number 8. Moving on to number 9, Tyler Lockett, another guy that consistently stays within the top 12 because of the offense and because of this matchup. Playing against the Browns, I don't think it's too difficult of a task at this moment. We saw, the 49ers just run the ball over them. That's probably what the Seahawks are going to do. They're going to pass the ball. They're going to run the ball heavily with Chris Carson, Rashad Penny, that combination. They're going to run the ball probably 30-plus times. On top of that, they're going to set up play action. They're going to find Disley. They're going to find Lockett. And eventually, these guys are going to score. Lockett continues to find himself in the end zone. Sure, he didn't have as many catches this past week that we would have liked against the Rams. He scored early in the first and then kind of faded away as the game progressed. But overall, I still think Tyler Lockett, a great start. He's my number 9. Moving on to number 10, DJ Chark. Yep, DJ Chark is my number 10. The reason he's up here is because I'm going to start him. No matter what, he is going to start over just about anybody because his consistency. If you're going to see as many targets as he has, I gotta really let's read this off, shall we? In terms of targets, it's insane. Okay, so starting off week 1, we can throw that away. But in the last couple of weeks, 9, 5, 8, and 11, those kind of target counts and having 5 receiving touchdowns in the first 5 weeks of the season, it's not a fluke at this point. DJ Chark, even though I do not like the prospect of a Jaguars receiver being this high, I'm starting him, and that's it. Plain and simple. I think he is going to produce as long as he continues to see these kind of targets. This defense of the New Orleans Saints is going to struggle at times. That is for certain. Secondary-wise, they're not great. Against the run, they're fine. What I expect to see is they're going to bottle up Leonard Fournette, force a lot of third downs, have Gardner Minshew have to pass the ball for this entirety of this game, and potentially DJ Chark has himself another good one. He's my number 10. Moving on to number 11. We have Julian Edelman playing against the Giants on Thursday night. Should be a pretty easy matchup. Should be a one-sided affair. The only issue that I could see potentially occurring is the fact that if the Patriots get ahead really early and want to kill the clock and run the ball out for the rest of the second half, that could hurt the potential of a Julian Edelman. But the Patriots, as of late, have not played exceptionally offensively, especially early in games. They haven't done themselves too many favors early in games, and I do think that they are going to be set in line where Julian Edelman, yes, you are the number one. There's no door set. Josh Gordon barely gets any work here and there, and Julian Edelman is going to find himself some success here. He's my number 11, a great start on the week. Moving on to 12, Mike Evans. Mike Evans, goose egg, 0 points, 3 targets, 0 receptions, nothing. Did nothing at all last week after 2 monster performances. The guy disappeared. So do we, throw him off of the ship? Do we just, tell him to walk the plank? Or do we trust him? Do we throw him back into the lineup? In my eyes, it's kind of hard to just tell Mike Evans to disappear. Unless you're willing to trade him away, you probably should have done that after the 40-point performance. At this point, you're probably stuck with a guy like Mike Evans, and I think comparatively to the other wide receivers you have, if you have another guy that is in, within 5 spots of him when we go to the wide receiver 2 page, then you can consider it. But I really do think that a guy like Mike Evans needs to be started. I know against the Panthers last time wasn't great, but these London games, man, they're a bit tricky. Really quickly before we leave this page, Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're going to determine whether or not they're going to play later on in the week. If they get full participation on Friday's practice, that is typically the nod that they are going to play. If these two are playing, they are in my lineups, plain and simple. They will be top, 10 wide receivers in my opinion if they are playing and healthy. That is all that needs to be said. And let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about my wide receiver 2s on the week. All right, guys, here we go. Number 13, Kenny Golladay. After what I saw, what Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper were capable of doing as a duo against this Green Bay secondary, yes, Dak Prescott turned over the ball a lot, but Kenny Golladay is the number 1 wide receiver of this team. Going forward, a lot of this offense is going to be dictated by his success. Yes, they have to run the ball consistently with Kerryon Johnson, but with Matthew Stafford looking as good as he has thus far this season, coming back from a season where, he didn't look like Matthew Stafford, and he truly wasn't. Thus far, has been great. Coming off of a bye week, they've been preparing for this game for, the last 2 weeks pretty much. So I expect them to strike early, and what do they have? They have a Monday night game, so they got a lot of time. They got a lot of rest coming off this bye week, and they'll be prepared for this team. Kenny Golladay, I got some confidence in him. He's my number 13. Moving on to 14, Tyler Boyd had himself a monster performance this last week. Gets to play against They gets to play against the Ravens. I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid of it at all. I do not believe that the Ravens defense is what it used to be. I think if, in fact, the Ravens get ahead early, that's even better. It promotes a shootout, and it promotes Andy Dalton dropping back and throwing the ball and potentially just finding Boyd. He's not going to throw the ball to Auden Tate very often. He's not going to see as many targets, but Tyler Boyd, in fact, will continue to see as many targets because he's sitting in that slot position where he has found the most success in his career. A guy that is in a pretty good matchup. I have no problem playing Tyler Boyd, and therefore he's my number 14. Moving on to 15. All right, here's the thing. If, in fact, you are going to have a week in which you get 16 targets, 14 receptions, 200-plus receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns, you cannot disappear the following week. I find it to be impossible that Will Fuller would disappear, especially against the Chiefs. If you're going to feed this guy the ball, it's either the other team's going to have to double cover him and leave DeAndre Hopkins open, or they're going to just feel the wrath of Will Fuller once again. Either way, Will Fuller is starting. Everybody, I'm sure all of you who own Will Fuller are putting him in the lineup, whether or not you had him in the lineup last week. That's for certain. Therefore, he's my number 15. I do think that you cannot have a 47-point fantasy performance and then show up the next week and not put up 10 points. You might end up being a Sammy Watkins in that perspective where you scored 3 touchdowns, and in the following weeks you disappear. But you've done enough disappearing, Will Fuller, thus far this season. You had what? Not even a 10-point performance prior to this one. Hopefully we continue to see more targets towards your direction. And this week, the matchup kind of promotes that. All right, moving on. Number 16, Michael Gallup. I've been talking a lot of Michael Gallup this week. I'm excited about him. The guy has been really good. When healthy, when playing, this offense is very effective when throwing the ball. And Michael Gallup is the number 2. Randall Cobb, I was almost convinced Randall Cobb was throwing the game on purpose to help the Green Bay Packers win last week. But hey, Michael Gallup had over 100 receiving yards, going to continuously see a great amount of targets this week against the Jets secondary, similar to Amari Cooper. I think it's a very favorable matchup, and I think he is a must-play at a wide receiver 2 spot this week. There's 4. He's my number 16. Moving on to number 17, Calvin Ridley. There are other options. Austin Hooper's been seeing, 9 targets like each of the last 3 weeks. Monster, just absorbing everything. Mohamed Sanu has seen a lot of work. Davante Freeman has seen a lot of work in the passing game. This could potentially hurt Calvin Ridley, but I do think that 2-week skid that he had really was just, we could chalk that away. We'll just get rid of it. At this moment in time, I really do think Calvin Ridley is the number 2. This offense has to consistently throw the ball 70% of the time, because if they don't, they are in danger of losing another game and starting, 1-5? If that happens, Dan Quinn's not keeping his job. So as of right now, Calvin Ridley, I'm pretty confident that this guy's going to get the ball in the passing game. As talented as he is, against the secondary, should be pretty free. He's my number 17. Moving on to 18. That is correct. We have Odell Beckham Jr. at 18. I had the slightest thought of putting him at 23, right next to Juju. And to be honest, he could be considered to be sat there. But I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Odell Beckham has not looked good. The Cleveland Browns offense has not looked good. He fumbled on a punt return. Really, he did nothing. Dropped passes, just ineffective, to say the least. As of right now, this is probably a week that you should sit him. This is probably a week that if, in fact, you have no other options that are sitting in the top 24, then, maybe you have to roll with him and you give him one more chance. But I don't know, man. Odell Beckham, there's nothing else really to analyze. As of right now, target counts are too low. Receiving counts are too low. Opportunities not there. They're trying to set him up by him throwing the pass, throwing the ball, doing end arounds, BS. I'm sick and tired of it. Just throw him the damn ball. And they can't do that. So, maybe we just sit him. But either way, I leave him at number 18 as of right now. Always rankings are subject to change, so we'll see. Moving on to number 19, Alshon Jeffery, the number 1 of the Eagles, playing against the Vikings. I think Alshon Jeffery, he's consistently been good. Obviously, we want to see him be better than that 11, 12 points in a half-point PPR scoring format. But I think we're going to take that as of right now. Going into this week's matchup, Carson Wentz won't be able to hide behind the fact that their defense is doing all the work. I think they're going to have to throw the ball in order to win this game. They're going to have to throw it effectively. And Alshon Jeffery with, the question mark of Deshaun Jackson, it's Alshon and it's Zach Ertz. Those are really the only receiving options of this team as of right now. So I have him at 19, and I have pretty much confidence in him that he's going to get the job done. All right, moving on to number 20, Robert Woods. I think, this is my entire thought process. I don't think Brandon Cooks is playing. I think that concussion is going to hold them out. I know they play this Sunday, and they've had a pretty good amount of time to deal with the concussion protocol, but he is still in concussion protocol, and I don't think he's going to be cleared before the game because of how many concussions he's had in the last couple seasons. Therefore, Robert Woods has a little bit more value. Robert Woods he has to prove himself to fantasy owners in order to start. But as of right now, against the matchup, Robert Woods should be fine. It should be a higher scoring event in my eyes. Yes, his pass rush is going to get after Goff. He's going to get the ball out of his hands early to Kupp, but Robert Woods is going to get his fair share, and he should be fine. He's my number 20. Moving on to 21, Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton plays against the Titans. Has been a monster in the last couple of weeks. And, obviously catching a ball and going, 75 yards to the house really helps your fantasy production in terms of scoring. But last week wasn't an easy matchup. Like Hayward, Desmond King, those corners are pretty good for the Chargers. And the fact that Courtland Sutton was still able to string together a very good performance, still see a good amount of targets. Emmanuel Sanders kind of disappeared this past week, but still Courtland Sutton has standing in a a pretty good spot in terms of fantasy owners. What we've seen from him as of late, the consistency, as long as it continues, we're going to put him in our lineups. He's at 21. All right, moving on to 22, Marquise Brown. Don't know exactly where he will be by Friday, but if he is a full participant, which I'm assuming is going to be happening, he's going to play this week against the Bengals, and I want him in my lineup. Deep threat, caught a touchdown last week prior to having to leave the game due to the ankle injury. Should be fine, should be good to go. As of right now, if Marquise Brown ends up not playing, then Willie Snead gets a little bit of a boost, but not enough to get him in the top 36 wide receiver conversation. It would only help Mark Andrews and Mark Ingram if he wasn't to play. But as of right now, I do think Marquise Brown is a good play at 22 if he's healthy and ready to go. Moving on to 23, DJ Moore, playing against that Tampa Bay secondary. Again, a defense that cannot stop a soul in terms of the passing game. It's going to be a lot on Kyle Allen. Last time they played against them, Shaq Barrett was coming off the edge. Ndamukong Suh was causing a lot of pressure, and I really do think there's going to be a little bit of there's going to be a lot of anger between these two teams, because the Carolina Panthers have won 2 games in a row now. They're getting a little bit of a hot streak going, and they got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a division rival, against them in London. This matchup could be pretty interesting. I think DJ Moore should be good to go. Last time they played against them, DJ Moore got a lot of targets from Cam Newton. Hopefully, as long as Kyle Allen feeds him the ball, because Kyle Allen can at least put the ball on him, it should be a little bit more effective in terms of fantasy scoring. He should be a pretty good play as a wide receiver too. Moving on to my last wide receiver two of the bunch, we have here Juju Smith-Schuster. Again, he has a third-string quarterback. If, in fact, you're willing to roll the dice and you're saying, I can't bench a stud, then Juju stays in your lineup and he sits as a wide receiver too. But in my opinion, him and Odell, these are guys that may need to sit for a couple weeks until we can determine their value, or maybe need to be traded. As of right now, against that Chargers secondary, it's not going to be an easy matchup, to say the least. I do have the Chargers defense as one of my top 2 defenses right next to the New England Patriots this week, because I do think it's going to be a one-sided affair where this defense is really making this rookie quarterback struggle. Therefore, Juju sits at 24 with very little confidence. He really could be on this last page for, honestly, he really could be here. All right, let's talk about my last group of wide receivers. My wide receiver 3s on the week, Larry Fitzgerald, starting it off at 25, playing against the playing against the playing against the Atlanta Falcons. Thank you. I was thinking of a red bird, and it just wasn't coming out. All right, finally, Larry Fitzgerald. You have the easiest matchup of the week for the wide receiver position. If Kyler Murray wants to throw a touchdown, maybe that would be nice. Kyler Murray's getting a lot of work done on the ground. 90 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, that helps. For fantasy owners, that's great for Kyler Murray owners. But Larry Fitzgerald needs more touches. He needs more targets. And with Christian Kirk probably out once again, Larry Fitzgerald needs to see 10-plus targets. And if he does, then he can get into that wide receiver 2 conversation. But as of right now, I'm just a little bit worried about this offense, especially if DJ is not available to play this week because of the back injury. It could hurt them. He sits at 25, but he could be in that top 24 conversation. Moving on to 26, Jarvis Landry. Jarvis has been the only consistent one, really. And he's not even that good. He's been okay, right? A couple weeks back against the Ravens was great. This past week could have been better, but still, he's been the only consistent one. Therefore, in this offense, going forward, I do think they're going to improve over time. It may not be drastic, but at least Jarvis Landry's getting targets. He's getting the ball in his hands, and he's making something of it. Therefore, he sits at 26. 27, for those of you who are Emmanuel Sanders owners, you're probably thinking, how could you trust him again? Well, the guy's had 3 major performances this year, 2 in which he scored a touchdown and 1 where he had over 100 receiving yards. That's why I trust him. Yes, this last week, the slot corner of the Chargers is good. He is an elite, cornerback. That's it. He's an elite nickelback. He's going to just lock people down. That's what he did. He did not allow Emmanuel Sanders to get anything going. This week against the Titans should be a bit easier. Should be. They're at home. I think Sanders will be better. Therefore, he's sitting at 27. If you don't want to start him, it's perfectly fine. I'm just going to play him. I have confidence in Emmanuel Sanders and this offense. 28, Stefon Diggs. If, in fact, they lock down Adam Thielen, there's only one other place to throw the ball. It's towards Diggs. I don't know if Diggs even wants to play for this team. Only time will tell. But as of right now, hopefully they can get Diggs more implemented in this offense, as they're going to have struggles running the ball. Diggs should be able to step up and have himself a good game. He's my number 28. Moving on to 29, Mecole Hardman. If, in fact, there is no Sammy Watkins and there is no Tyreek Hill, I absolutely want to play Mecole Hardman or, Byron Pringle or Demarcus Robinson. But Hardman has consistently played well as of late. He had that one flub week, but what was that, against the Lions, that he wasn't that great? Yeah, that's fine. So be it. As of right now, the way I see it, if there's no number 1 and 2 wide receiver this team, Hardman's going to have to step up, and he's probably going to see a lot of work, especially against the Texans. So he might even move up this list if, in fact, we get a for sure Sammy Watkins and Tyreek Hill aren't playing. If one of them do play, it lowers his value and leaves him at this number 29 spot. We'll see. Either way, he's sitting here as wide receiver 3. Moving on to 30, Josh Gordon. My only problem with Josh Gordon is that he doesn't score. He doesn't see enough targets, and the schedule is so easy for the Patriots that they don't need to really feed him the ball. They just have to get into the end zone a couple times, play defense. Defense will score, kick a couple field goals. The score is 28-7. GG, they win. So Josh Gordon, you sit as a wide receiver 3 option as of right now until maybe we can get a higher scoring event between two teams. Moving on to 31, Jamison Crowder. Because of the fact that Sam Darnold is back, he's going to have to throw the ball somewhere, and it's probably only going to go towards Jamison Crowder. I do think that Sam Darnold's going to have to get the ball out of his hands very quickly. In terms of how bad this offensive line has been in the last couple weeks, it's unbelievable. I understand they have been protecting a bad quarterback in Nick Folk and Trevor Siemian, but still, those guys have not been able to protect against the pass rush, and I do believe that the Dallas Cowboys pass rush is better than a lot of people anticipate in terms of Robert Quinn, DeMarcus Lawrence getting after it. Should be a lot of pressure. Therefore, Darnold's going to have to get the ball out of his hands quickly. Jamison Crowder is the guy to go to. He's my number 31. Moving on to 32, Curtis Samuel in that easy matchup against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All the receiving options for the Panthers should be relevant. It should be a very higher scoring matchup in terms of just heavy passing. I understand Christian McCaffrey is the number 1 option on that team, but if they could stop the run, force them to have to pass the ball, it'll help other guys like Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore. Therefore, Curtis Samuel sits at 32. Now, Terry McLaurin, like I mentioned earlier, because Case Keenum is the starting quarterback, he needs to jump, right? The graphic is not right. I probably would put Terry McLaurin in my top 24. I probably have him above Juju, to be honest. Against the Miami Dolphins, that's just too easy of a matchup. So now that we are all on the same page, you are watching this, Terry McLaurin is a top 24 receiving option in my eyes. Thank you. We're good to go. Next, Mohamed Sanu. Again, this Falcons team's throwing the ball so much, everybody's becoming relevant. One of these guys is going to have a little bit of a lower game between Mohamed Sanu, Ridley, and Julio. Could be Julio again. But until then, I trust Julio way more than a guy like Mohamed Sanu, who has been consistent. 10+ fantasy points last 3 weeks. That's great. And therefore, that's why he is a top 36 wide receiver option if you need a wide receiver 3 for your team. Moving on to number 35, Marques Valdez-Scantling. Again, if Davante Adams plays, a guy like this pretty much loses value. But if he doesn't, he played 94% of offensive snaps. Didn't see a lot of work in the passing game because they truly didn't have to pass the ball against the Cowboys. This week, if in fact the push comes to shove, Davante Adams is gone, Marques Valdez-Scantling is still the number 1 wide receiver and should be able to step up and be a wide receiver 3. The last option I wanted to mention is Golden Tate of the New York Giants. There is nobody else to catch the ball for them this week. Maybe Slayton, maybe Latimer. I don't know. Look, somebody else is going to have to come off the practice squad to catch a couple passes. I do believe that hopefully Golden Tate in the slot position, getting the ball out of Daniel Jones' hands quickly, could be an option on Thursday night. Therefore, he sits at 36. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Those are my top 36 rankings at the wide receiver position as of right now. Rankings are always subject to change. If you want to, stay up to date on my rankings, my Patreon page, the link is down in the description. You get unlimited questions and answers, 2 private live streams a week, and updated rankings, flex, wide receiver, running back, quarterback, tight end, etc. Updates every couple days throughout the week. So if you're interested, Patreon link is down below. Thank you, everybody who continues to watch. I appreciate it. Tomorrow will be wide receiver. No, they won't be wide receivers. It'll be quarterbacks and tight ends. I don't know how I messed that up. Maybe because I'm looking at wide receivers on my screen right now. But as of right now, in terms of tomorrow, straightforward. Thursday night game, not really fun. You're starting your Edelmans, you're starting Sony, you're starting James White, Tom Brady, maybe Josh Gordon if you're desperate and you have a 3 wide receiver league. Outside of that, the Patriots defense, and then maybe Golden Tate if you're desperate and you've got a lot of bye weeks. But that's pretty much it. So thank you everybody for watching. And until tomorrow, quarterbacks, tight ends, I'll see you guys. Peace.